Dogworks Radio is sponsored by Alaska Dogworks. Check out their website at alaskadogworks.com.
Start your day tomorrow with The Daily Dog with Michelle Forto, the morning podcast on Dogworks Radio. Apple Podcast reviewer Patty Christensen calls it funny, smart, and filled with all the info I want to know about dogs. I love this show. Wake up with The Daily Dog. Available on Dogworks Radio on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your shows.
Radio Free Palmer 89.5 KVRF presents Mushing Radio, hosted by Robert Forto. Mushing Radio is about dog-powered sports, living in the Great White North, and mushing. Visit our website at mushingradio.com. Here is your host, Robert Forto.
Hello and welcome, everybody. This is Robert Forto, and you're listening to Mushing Radio here on KVRF 89.7 in the Mat-Su Valley. RadioFreePalmer.org is our live streaming site, and you can find all of our episodes over on DogWorksRadio.com. Today I am joined by Iditarod musher Emily Maxwell. Emily, how's it going?
Very well. How are you?
I am well, thank you. Emily, can you introduce yourself and tell us who you are and what you're all about, please?
Yeah, so my name is Emily Maxwell. I grew up in Iowa City, Iowa, and I moved to Alaska in January of 2016. And I lived and trained with Nick Petit, mushing dogs. And I did my rookie Iditarod this year, 2018, and got 33rd place.
So when you came up from Iowa, did you have any intentions at all of getting involved with mushing, or were you just coming up here to hang out in our beautiful state?
Definitely the latter. I had met Nick the summer before when I was on a vacation up here, and we sort of hit it off, and I went back to Iowa, and I was in school, but we kept in touch, and I visited here once again, and he visited me there, and then I moved up, and I really didn't plan to be a musher, and I was really scared to ever try and even go out on my own. I basically just ran his dogs behind him for that first, year that I was up here, and then people would ask, oh, when are you going to do the Iditarod? And I was like, never. I'll never do that race. I don't want to race at all. And then, slowly started to change my mind as my confidence built with running dogs.
And you caught the bug, so to speak. Emily, can you share a little bit of your story? I know people talked about it during the race itself, about how you were a bartender in Iowa, and then you had an accident, and that sort of propelled you to have a lifestyle change. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. I was a bartender. I was also waiting tables at a restaurant, and I had an accident one day in the restaurant. We had to walk through the main kitchen to the back to drop dishes, which isn't kind of a normal setup in a restaurant, but it was a small place, and that was just how it worked. And so one day I was walking through the kitchen, and it was slippery, and I slipped, and it was a real narrow kitchen, and the cook that was on duty had left a skillet with a handle sticking out into the walkway. So when I fell right into that handle, and that handle was attached to a skillet full of boiling hot oil.
Oh, my goodness.
And so that skillet flew over on top of me when I hit the ground, and I got rained on by hot oil. So, and I was burned, second and third degree burns over 20% of my body, and spent 2 weeks in intensive care at the University of Iowa, and had, skin graft surgery. I've got 5 skin grafts, and like a pretty harrowing and certainly life-changing experience that definitely changed my perspective on a lot of things in my life. And so, yeah, I ended up the following year going back to school, and and every year after that, the second anniversary of when that happened, I always liked to get out of town at that time of year. I just didn't like to be around there. So the first year I went to Chicago, went to a Chicago Cubs game and actually caught a foul ball, which was pretty cool. And then the second year on that anniversary is when I met Nick in Girdwood. So it's kind of a chain reaction of events.
And I guess it just keeps going in terms of those cool things that are happening. You know, I'm reading your bio here, and you are not one that sits around and watches a lot of television, it looks like. It says that you ran with the bulls, skydived, you worked as a long-haul trucker, and you raced triathlons. Can you tell a bit about some of those adventures you've been on?
Yeah, when I was 22, I just was kind of, bumping along through life and just decided to move to Spain, which I did. And I actually went through a Cambridge University program there to teach English. And so I taught English there a little bit over a year. But I think within that first month, I was living in this small town. It wasn't like the big Pamplona running, but smaller towns too, they do bull running. And so I did that with some friends that were visiting, and that was pretty wild. I don't know, I guess I've always been one that I wouldn't say I go looking for, adventure or risk taking or anything like that, but if, the opportunity presents itself, I'm usually up for it. And then I lived there for a little while and moved back, and I started dating someone who was a trucker. Actually, he had his own furniture moving company, and I worked with him, mostly through the summer, because furniture moving people move more in the summer, for the next 6 or 7 years. And so we went, crisscross the lower 48 every summer, and had a random day off in Miami, and I had wanted to go skydiving, and there was a place, and so we went, and just kind of, when things come up, even if I'm a little bit scared to do it, I think, when else do you get this opportunity? So.
Right, for sure. Well, you had mentioned when things come up, and you mentioned coming up to Alaska and met Nick and got a little bit involved with his kennel and his dogs and whatnot. And you were a little hesitant to race, but obviously you had to do some qualifiers to get to the starting line of Iditarod. When did you do those, and which races were they?
I did those in the 2016-17 season. The first qualifier I did was the Connect 200. We got 10th place, and that was my first, big race. So I was really excited about that. And I'd actually taken a wrong turn, which cost me an hour and a half and, probably 8 miles. And so that was a bummer, but, still got 10th. So I was pretty happy about that. The following weekend, I did the Copper Basin 300. And we got 11th. And then the final qualifier I did was the Willow 300, which was, of course, in its first year. And they did an incredible job. That was definitely the most fun I think I've ever had on a race, was that year's Willow. And I got 6th, actually, on that race. So, so those were my qualifiers.
So this year, Nick was burning up the trail on Iditarod. I think he came in first place in every race he ran except Iditarod, and he was very close to doing that. Were you running his puppy team or his B team or something of the such?
Yeah, it was sort of a mix of puppy and B team. And a lot of the dogs that I ran on my team were from my qualifiers last year that had, done really well. And a lot of those dogs had done Iditarod with him previously and obviously placed pretty well, as he always has. And then I did take 3 yearlings on my team this year that they're actually named after the Reddington family. So the 3 yearlings I took were Joey, which was pretty cool because he was the honorary musher. Or I'm sorry, I didn't take Joey. Nick took Joey. I took Ramy Reddington, Robert, and Timmy, who's the brother of Joey and Ramy.
Very cool.
And they all did really well. Let me think. Robert didn't finish with me. I think I had to drop him in Caltag, but both Ramy and Timmy did finish with me.
So, Emily, before we jump into talking about the race, can you tell us a little bit about your guys' kennel setup? I know that you're sort of based in Girdwood, but do you guys spend time down there for training, or do you come up a little north? What happens there? How many dogs do you have? That sort of stuff.
So in the summertime, and I should mention, we're not together anymore, so I won't be training with him again this next year. But in the summer, years past, we've been down in Girdwood, and he will be again this year. And he gives a tour there with the dogs through the summer, which is, of course, really good for the dogs. It's socializing throughout the summer. And, they're getting harnessed every day and, short runs. Obviously, it's not a long tour. But yeah, so that's kind of through the summer, and we would live down there, with the dogs. And then in the, fall, winter, we'd be back up to Willow. And we've been really lucky to stay at a friend's house this year and last year that they're on a private property, and we have really great trails and a great dog yard. And so it's kind of, the perfect life, 6 months here, 6 months there, and then, always with the dogs and, always working with them. And so they have a really, good life too.
Right.
And he's got, let me think, about 45 dogs right now, including, puppies that were too small to run this year. So although I think he's now selling some of them because it'll be a smaller kennel.
Right. Yeah. So when you guys prepared to get ready for Iditarod, you and the dogs that you were running, as a rookie, what was going through your mind? Of course, it's a much different animal, so to speak, when you're lining up for a race like that compared to a much smaller race like the Connect 200. What were your thoughts getting ready to run as a rookie?
Oh, I was I don't know. I mean, cautiously optimistic, I would say. I definitely felt, a few times like, gosh, maybe am I in over my head right now? Because, I mean, a lot of the rookies, some of them have been mushing for like 15 years. I moved up here 2 years ago. I went on my first run by myself like 18 months ago or less,
Right.
So it was kind of a quick turnaround. So, I believe in the dogs, certainly. Like I knew the dogs could do it. And, deep down, I think I knew I could too. It's like, of course, sometimes people say, oh, it's just 300 back to back to back. And it's like, no, it's not. But, it's like, okay, I knew to focus on the dogs and just focus on their care. And I knew everything would be fine. And I was trying not to worry about how we were going to place. I just wanted to get there. And obviously I wanted to keep them happy. And keep them really well fed, and that all panned out great. And I'm, was really happy with how we finished, and that, that they were in really good spirits the whole time, which of course as a musher, it's like having kids. I think, if they're happy, then you're happy.
Right, for sure. So when you mentioned that, that you were cautiously optimistic going into it and possibly over your head. You obviously finished very well, definitely in the middle of the pack there. When did you finally realize I've got this and everything's going to be good and we're going to finish this thing?
I mean, I think that feeling kind of came and went because, I would say the, fourth and fifth day, I was sort of hitting this peak, and I had heard people say that I had only obviously done a 300, and it's like you're really tired the whole time and you kind of just want to get to the finish, and obviously 1,000 miles is a whole different animal, as you said. So days 4 and 5, I was like really, the sleep deprivation I was kind of getting used to it, and I felt really good physically, and the dogs were doing great. We were all really happy, and so I felt like this was going to be a great race. And then after days like 7, 8, 9, somewhere in there. Like when I hit Unilicate, I was, mentally for me, it was kind of at a low. I had dropped 3 dogs in Caltag. And then, it's like an 85-mile run to Unilicate. And towards the end of that run, they were, just being a little bit squirrely, not really listening to commands. And I was tired and just, dehydrated and all these things that happen. So at Unilicate, I was definitely having a lot of doubts, and again, I think you doubt yourself more than, you doubt the dogs. The dogs are always fine, they're always ready to go, but it's you that's kind of the weak link, which any musher will tell you. But then later in the race, I try to keep my spirits up and like really visualize crossing the finish line. And that helped a lot. And then, later in the race, we also rested more and more at the checkpoints just because I didn't, I just wanted them to be happy. And I was like, we'll get there when we get there. And then in White Mountain, of course, there's all these stories about dog teams in the past that have, quit on mushers. And it's heartbreaking because they're so close to the finish. And I mean, I think I knew in retrospect that wouldn't happen. But, it was sort of in the back of my mind while we were doing our 8-hour rest there. And when I, went out and we were getting ready to go, actually Lev Schwartz, who's a neighbor and a friend also, he came over and we were kind of chatting as I'm, getting everybody hooked up and bootied and everything. And they were all laying down. It was, in the afternoon, and they're kind of like enjoying the sunshine and the straw. I thought, oh man, I hope they're going to be ready to go. And so as I'm talking to Lev, my parka was hanging over the handlebar, and I picked it up, and the second I did, every single dog stood up at the same time, and it was amazing. Like, they've never done that even on, shorter races. So at that point, I knew we were going to have a good last run. And Lev looked at me, he's like, man, you did a good job if that's the response you're getting right now, So yeah, that last run was like, I was really, high on it and feeling really good for the end of the race. So you had a nice way to finish it.
So you had about 70 miles or so, 77 miles or so to go, I guess about 10 hours or so, depending on the speed and the conditions. How did it feel coming into Nome as a rookie finisher, and you've done it, that 1,000 miles is now behind you, and that couple of years' work is sort of in the history books? What was the thoughts going through your head at that point?
Oh, it was very surreal, I'll say, because, the last 2 years I'd volunteered on the trail with the drop dog program, and then I would fly to Nome to see Nick come in. And so then, and all that time, people had asked, when are you going to do this race? And I was like, I don't want to do this race. And then, so here I was, like, coming in, the same trail everybody else has done for years. And yeah, I just kind of, I sometimes I feel like I'm still processing that, I did that. And, I don't know, just like so proud of those dogs, and had such a positive experience that they really mentally were, and, their spirits were high basically the entire race. They also ate really, really well. I mean, like every snack, every meal I ever gave them, they all just tore through it, which is of course your dream, because, if they start to skip here and there, they're getting finicky. It can be hard to catch them up. So I was really happy about that. And then actually I got in, I think like 4:55 a.m. or something, so it was of course still dark out. And as we were on the sea ice, and of course you can see Nome for what feels like forever. But off to my right, I looked up, and it was like I did a double take because it looked like the Northern Lights were coming out. And I actually kind of thought I was hallucinating maybe. And I looked up like 4 or 5 times. I was like, no, they're still there. And yeah, it was kind of a neat, way to finish that race as well, because I hadn't seen them out the entire race. And then right as, we've got like 5 miles left, it's just like this very nice moment, with you and your dogs. And it's your last few moments of really just being together through all this time where you're, 24/7 together.
Right.
So that was a really nice way to finish that race.
You hear a lot of stories like that, where people stop a few miles outside of Nome and have that last little bit of time with their dogs. A lot of times they go up and hug their dogs or whisper to their dogs or whatever before they finish, because you guys have literally been out there for, a week to 10 days, depending on where you're finishing. And then all of a sudden you're back into quote unquote civilization again. And I imagine it's a little bit of a shock for you and for the dogs. It's a much different type of deal than coming into a very small checkpoint, isn't it?
Yes, definitely. It's funny. A few people have commented, either that were there, that they saw the video of my finish. They're like, yeah, it was great. You were just so focused on snacking the dogs. And it was like, well, yeah, I mean, that's like all I could think to do, because, it's like there weren't a ton of people there, but there were friends, and Nick was there. And of course, I think the insider cameras and everything were there, and, there's bright lights, and you're just kind of overwhelmed. And I was just, you're like so focused on the dogs by that time that it was like, I almost didn't know how to hold a conversation with anybody right there, and just, got off and started snacking the dogs, and kind of like, it's definitely an adjustment and kind of a shock to come in there. I can't imagine, if there's like hundreds of people along Front Street and tons of like news crews and everything at the front of the pack. It must be really intense. But yeah, it's definitely a shocker.
So during the race, you had a really active Facebook following over on your Facebook page. It's Iowa City to Nome. Is that right?
Right. Yep.
Yeah, people were really active there. Was that your family and friends that were doing that for you?
Yeah, that was my mom, actually. It was really nice of her. About a year ago, I mean, even before I had, signed up for this race, she said she wanted to do like a Facebook page for me, just because here and there I would post little pictures and stuff from training, but not, I'm not very good with kind of keeping up with that stuff. And yeah, she had the time and the interest. And so she did a good job. I mean, I don't know how she finds half the stuff she finds on me, but yeah, she kept it really active. And I've had a lot of people say since the race, that they love following it. And I definitely noticed, like, before the race, during versus after, that there were a lot of people had started joining it and following it regularly. So that was really cool. She did a really good job.
She did a very good job. And we host our daily coverage here on Mushing Radio. Every day we're talking about the Iditarod, and that was one of the pages that we would go to find out stories about how you were doing on the trail. And I believe my co-host Alex showcased you one of the nights on Mushing Radio. So folks that are listening today know a little bit about your story and sort of how you got to the starting line. So it's really cool to have you back on to sort of talk about the race. So we have just a couple more minutes left, Emily. You said that you and Nick are no longer together, and I assume you're on to doing other things. You've already done the skydiving and the bull running, and now you've done Iditarod. What's next for you?
I'd actually like to stay in mushing. I have kind of just like jumped from one thing to another in my life, because it wasn't necessarily something I wanted to stick with. But I definitely, I really felt
90 seconds
support and just, the people, like everything about it. I feel very at home, and it's hard work, but it's really rewarding. And so I'm talking to one friend about potentially running dogs for him this next year. But yeah, I'm really hoping, I don't know if I'll be able to necessarily sign up for Iditarod this next year. It's obviously, financially and in other ways quite the undertaking. But I definitely hope that I can do it again.
60 seconds.
I learned so much the last 2 years in general. And of course on Iditarod, you learn so much that I would love to keep, going with it and learning and really trying to understand dogs better as much as I can, and maybe learn from other mushers. You always learn from other mushers. That's the best thing about racing. So, yeah, hopefully I'll still be doing it.
Excellent, for sure. Emily, is there anybody you would like to thank here at the end of our show? And can you tell folks how to find you on social media or website or whatever you have?
Yeah, I have a million people I could thank. So I'll just say thanks to Iowa City, Iowa, my hometown, because so many people, so many businesses there.
10 seconds.
Really helped me. Number one for me is George's Buffet. I worked there for 10 years before I moved up, and they've done so much for me. And of course, my folks have done a lot. And then Girdwood, Alaska, where we live in the summer, they've been incredibly supportive to Nick for a long time, and now to me that I got into this. So yeah, I have, and of course there's a million people I could thank, but yeah. And then also online, the Facebook page, Iowa City to Nome, and if anybody ever wanted to send me Facebook Messenger message, I'm on there as well under Emily Maxwell. So
Excellent.
Easy to find.
And we'll definitely put those links over on your show page when that goes live. Emily, thank you very much for joining us, and we'll talk again soon, okay?
Sounds great. Thanks, Robert.
Thank you. On behalf of my co-host today, Iditarod musher Emily Maxwell, this is Robert Forto for Mushing Radio. We will see you guys next time. Goodbye.
Did you know that Alaska Dog Works trains service dogs for those in need throughout North America? Each and every service dog that is trained through the Lead Dog Service Dog Program and Michelle Forto and her team has an individual training plan. We train for autistic, mobility, psychiatric, and PTSD for our soldiers for service work. If you know of someone that may need a service dog, please take a moment and check out Alaska Dog Works on social media and at alaskadogworks.com.
Hi, this is Alex Stein, co-host of Mushing Radio on Dogworks Radio. We just completed our first storytelling season on the 1925 Serum Run. Almost 100 years later, the 1925 Serum Run is something that is still inspirational, amazing, and in many ways larger than life. We've gathered all of these episodes together on one page to make it easier for you to listen to them in order. Just go to dogworksradio.com/serumrun. That's SERUMRUN, no space, dogworksradio.com/serumrun. And while you're at it, don't forget to subscribe to Dogworks Radio at Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever it is that you go to listen to podcasts.
If you like our podcast, there are a few things you can do. You can take a couple of minutes and go to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review. You can also check out all of our Dogworks Radio sponsors and promotions in our show notes. Another thing you can do is go over to Facebook, like our Facebook page, and one last thing, please tell all of your friends by spreading the word about Dogworks Radio. Thank you so much for listening to us. We really appreciate you.
Dogworks Radio is produced by Robert Forto. Logo art by Angry Squirrel Studios. Dogworks Radio is produced in conjunction with KVRF 89.7 in Palmer, Alaska.
For dog training advice, you can contact Alaska Dogworks at 907-841-1686 or visit their website at alaskadogworks.com. If you have a show idea or would like to be a guest, please contact us by sending an email to live@dogworksradio.com.